no one's giving Reed Harris the praise he deserves because this guy is going to be a major factor in 2025.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I am your host, AJ Black of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Network. I've been covering Boston College for over a decade, and if you're looking for the news, analysis, and scoops around your Boston College Eagles, you have found the perfect place to get that. We are a daily free podcast available 5 days a week on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and we talk BC sports all the time. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more with FanDuel. New customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. We're getting closer and closer to the start of practice. We're about a month away, less than a month away. Everyone's excited. On today's show, Bill Connelly, SP Plus, ESPN. He's going to give you. We're going to recap what he said about BC's upcoming season, what the numbers say. We're going to look at another recruit that has BC in their top 4 and where that lands and what the factors are going into this one. And we're going to start this off by talking about another player. Earlier this week we talked about VJ Wilkins, and I was like, you know what? I feel like, the flashy new player is always the ones that get the most attention. But I think there's another player that's going to make a major impact on the 2025 season that we are not talking about enough, that I think is going to be exponentially better than he was last year. And that's 6'5" wide receiver Reed Harris. Now, Reed Harris has the story that many of you already know. He played high school quarterback, comes here. They don't really know what to do with him. He's an athlete. He can do a whole bunch of different things. But Jeff Hafley, he puts him in at tight end. Even Bill O'Brien at the beginning of this year puts him in at tight end. But by the end of last year, the end of the 2024 season, we saw a wide receiver that was on the cusp of breaking out. You look at his whole season. The beginning of the year, he has a touchdown catch against Missouri. That was a fluke one because I believe the defender who was covering him fell down. You really can't, get a whole lot out of that. But by the end of the year, once he's put out there as a wide receiver, he's making circus catches on the daily. He has 2 Randy Moss catches of the week in back-to-back weeks. I think it was against Pitt and against UNC. He got a real good chemistry going with Grayson James after Tommy Castellanos couldn't figure out how to get him the ball. And if you look at the statistics, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, it really paints a picture of how much this kid developed and how much Will Lawing and Bill O'Brien figured out how to use him. Because when you had him, lining up inside as a extra lineman, when you had him basically playing tight end, it was not using Reed Harris to the best of your ability. You look at when they benched Tommy Castellanos, that Syracuse game. He had a big 0 in that game for catches. But from then on out, he became a valuable asset to this roster. He has something that you do not get at Boston College. A lot has been made of Calvin Russell, this 6'5" wide receiver that Syracuse just got. You have a guy that's the same size, Reed Harris, and he is showing that he has hands that can be comparable to a lot of other wide receivers out there. The way that he was able to make some catches, especially in the red zone, made Jerron Bradley, a guy I thought was going to be a major factor on this roster, expendable. When you got closer to that end zone, or you were going for plays that needed a big wideout out there, they trusted Reed Harris. The staff love him. He works his butt off. He's a guy that they really, really respect for the amount of work that he's put into his craft. And it's very clear on the field. So I look at the end of his year. Before Castellanos was, when Tommy Castellanos was the quarterback, he had a total of 5 receptions the entire year. That's all he had. You know, that's fine, but a couple of them were big. I think he had two. He had two touchdown catches on big plays. I think he was averaging like 70 yards a reception with his catch against Duquesne and his catch against Missouri. But day to day, he really wasn't doing much. He was more of a blocker, but not the weapon. Now you look after Tommy Castellanos and Syracuse 0, but 4 catches for 78 yards against Southern Miss. 3 catches for 76 yards and a touchdown against UNC. 3 catches for 85 yards and a touchdown against Pitt. And 2 catches for 25 yards. But it was a tougher weather game against Nebraska and against a good defense too. So you see that you have your Lewis Bond. Lewis Bond is your volume catcher. Guys, he's going to get you 6 or 7 catches every game unless he's playing against an elite cornerback. He's that good. But you need to have a couple wide receivers to have a really good offense, unless you have Zay Flowers, but that's a different story. Reed Harris is going to be that guy this year. Now that he has settled into the role that he is going to be, you're going to see what you saw at the end of last year. I'm going to tell you right now, what you saw at the end of last year is what I saw at practice all summer long. And it was surprised me it took so long to get him out there, because this is a guy who has the size to make a matchup nightmare against most cornerbacks, but not, size is one thing, but to have some athleticism and good hands. He can run good routes and he's tough as nails. All of those things make him such a valuable resource for your team. And the fact that he can block too, you've already saw it. He can do it when he's a tight end. And so I think that Reed Harris, he's not getting enough praise. There's all the preseason ACC teams, and yeah, he shouldn't be on that. But when people are talking about what Boston College's offense could look like this year, you're not seeing his name come up enough, because you're looking at a guy that, if they continue to play the way that they did, could get you 40 catches, 45 catches, get you 70, 700, 800 yards receiving. That is excellent production. All he has to do is stay healthy and for them to continue to trust him in this offense. And I think they will. As I said, O'Brien, Law, they all respect Reed Harris and think he is a leader in this group. And he's just warming up. He is just warming up. He was a redshirt freshman last year. I was honestly surprised that no schools came knocking trying to get him to leave, because you don't find wide receivers that can do what he can do often. They're not there's not many of them on the trees. You know what I mean? So I look at Reed Harris, and will he be all ACC by the end of the year? Probably not. I would say not first team, because the Clemson duo, they're going to probably take up most wide receivers. But could he be a third team all ACC wide receiver? Not out of the realm of possibilities. This is something that he could grow into. And it doesn't matter if it's James, who he has a great connection with clearly on the field, or Dylan Lonergan. Whoever's getting him the ball, they're going to get him the ball, and he's going to get touchdowns. That's what he's there for. Now, in our second segment, let's get into recruiting. BC, as I said, I have crystal balls against Carter Gooden, but there's another name that we've talked about a bit that's kind of peeking back out there, and I want to tell you where things stand with him in just a moment. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You've already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups with the Boston Red Sox. They went on a 6-game losing streak. I told you about this last week. I was fading on them. Now they're starting to get back into it. They're playing a little bit easier. Maybe I'm going to lay off on that and start to ride the matchups more for the Sox. It's so easy to use. It's fast to pay out, make even regular season games feel like must-watch events. I love using same-game parlays, making a home run bet, those home run prop bets are always a blast. And if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. It's the easiest app to use. If you want to get started, just download the app. I'm telling you, you'll get used to it and you'll be making bets in no time. So open the new FanDuel app today or visit fanduel.com to get yourself started. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black. I want to shout out my first listens, my people who make Locked On Boston College your first listen every day. Whether you open up your car, you get that air conditioner cranked, you turn on Locked On BC to hear that summer talk, or you're doing it as you're making yourself breakfast in the morning. You guys are my MVPs. I want to thank each and every one of you. And if you have made us, and if you're an everydayer who listens to us 5 days a week, you guys are even better. So thank you all who have listened to us all 5 shows over the last week. Now, recruiting. As I said before, Tabor Academy, edge rusher, Carter Gooden, now is up to 3 crystal balls looking at UCLA. I've placed one based off the things I've heard from my sources. I don't think things are going to go well here. He's probably going to end up in Los Angeles. But a new name has reemerged on the recruiting circuits. That is Osceola, Florida defensive tackle Amier Clarke. Now, I had him. He was here 2 week, the second to last week of official visits. So that was the 13th of June. And I had heard all along that Boston College had him at the top of their boards for defensive tackles, as guys that they were looking at. However, BC, this was another guy. The BC got in on early, and then a bunch of other schools found out about him, and they all started offering. So his official visit month was I think 5 or 6 official visits. Well, he gets to BC, takes the visit, does not commit. Ends up at Syracuse the next week, does not commit. Things just go quiet. At this point, I'm just thinking, A, there must be something else going on, and maybe they're just not interested anymore, or they landed Gavin Neal, another defensive tackle, and that's the spot that they had, or they just don't have the room. I don't know. I just didn't expect him to be back in the picture. Well, Amier Clarke on Monday tweeted out 2 things. First of all, he tweeted out his top 4, which was Syracuse, Rutgers, Boston College, and Georgia Tech. That eliminated UCF, who was another team that he took an official visit with. Then he also said he's going to commit on Thursday. So I would imagine if BC had stopped talking to him, if they had moved on, he would not put BC, he would have made a top 3 and moved on from them. I also think that now that, the presumption that Carter Gooden is not going to be here opens up a spot. That +1 is probably a spot that could go to Amier Clarke. And he is the type of nose tackle that you need on this roster. Yes, he's not a top 247 recruit. Yes, he's not a 4-star, but he's a kid from Florida who has a very good offer list and rated an 86. He's a 3-star that you could really use on this roster. I have said multiple times when I talked about Gavin Neal committing, BC's defensive tackle room is going to get hammered after this year. They're going to lose Chuck Nadeau, the transfer from Elon, Owen Stodmeyer, Ty Clemens, Quan Williams, Ced McConnell. They lost George Rooks already. They are very, very thin. Now, they've added Mekhi Byerson and Chris Marable. Those are 2 additions that you needed. But you still need to continue to build that depth at that position. And you added Mac Fitzgerald from Zavarian Brothers. And as I mentioned, Gavin Neal. A 3rd one would be fine. That gives you 5 defensive tackles in the last 2 years for BC. So this would be, you would probably after this year maybe need another transfer, someone who could instantly come in and play. But then you're looking at 2027 and beyond, you're probably in much better position for that. So where do things stand? Everything is quiet from what I've heard. I'm not getting any vibes. I don't see any crystal balls. I've talked to some people. All the other programs I've heard, they're getting the same vibes. So this is a complete mystery. This could be a BC get. This could be one of these other programs could be, leaning that way too. So he's announcing on Thursday. Jordan Best, a cornerback that BC had shown interest in, he's announcing on the 12th, which is on Saturday. He's the same type of deal here, where he came and visited, didn't commit, checked out NC State, didn't commit, did a whole bunch of camps. I don't know where he stands. If I was a betting man there, I think he's probably gonna. I said this before. I think he's probably gonna commit to NC State. That's just my gut. But he's another name to watch for. So there's these are two that are going on. And I keep going back to this when we were talking about the card good and stuff. You have these two. You easily, I really think Clarke could be a commitment. Like BC really wanted him. So the desire to get him is there. As long as he thinks that BC is the place to go to, we might get the Spencer Dickow tweet, or I don't know if he's doing a hat ceremony. I don't know what's going on there, but I think he could be a get. I don't think Jordan Best. My gut is that he won't be. And then the class can continue to grow. I really do think there's two, piles of recruits that you're going to be looking at: the flips and the late bloomers. And you can't crap all over the late bloomers, because your best recruit you got last year was a late bloomer. Sterling Sanders was a guy that many of you, when I talked about him committing, got on my message board or on Twitter and said, what are they going after? Yeah, that's great. BC's doing a great job going after someone from Georgia State or Georgia Southern or whatever it was from. And he turns into a 4-star recruit. It could happen again. I'm saying the staff knows they do a good job of evaluating talent. They might find another guy like that. So that could happen. And believe me, a lot of guys that are committing to schools are going to programs that could have bad years and things could happen. I look at Rocky Cummings. That's the one name I keep going back to. He's playing at Cal. You've got that really, really weird situation where they got a coach that maybe is on his way out. They got Ron Rivera, who is coming in and basically like holding his hand. It seems weird. Something could happen there. UCLA, you get Deshaun Foster. Things could be a disaster. I mean, they got Nico, the quarterback from Tennessee. That could fix things, and I'm not doubting them, but that could be a disaster. So, there's things that could happen that could also end up with flips. So that's just something to watch for too. And of course, I know you guys hate hearing about it, but there's always guys that BC has committed that could flip too. It happened before. It could happen again. It's just the nature of college football. I think we all understand it at this point, but that's something we could be waiting to see happen too. In a moment, Bill Connelly of ESPN gives his thoughts using just his numbers on what BC to expect from BC. I'll give you my thoughts on what he came up with and why it's not that far off from what we're all saying. So we'll get into all of that in just a moment. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black of Eagle Insider. Thank you all who have made us your first listen every single day. Now, if you're looking for a second listen, go check out Locked On ACC with Kenton Gibbs and Alex Dono. It's a great podcast. It talks about the Atlantic Coast Conference. You can find that on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Now, Bill Connelly is a guy that many, he falls into that. He's a writer for ESPN. He had his own shtick on SB Nation for a while, but he's gotten bigger, and he has created a statistical system called SP Plus, and I'm not going to get into what it all means, that basically can help predict what is going to happen in college football. Now, I have a lot of respect for Bill, because Bill does what a lot of folks don't want to do, and he takes out the emotion and just looks at the hard data. And the hard data doesn't lie. Men lie, women lie, numbers don't lie. And that's what he's found. So I look at what he has out now for BC. And there's some interesting numbers I think we should look at. First of all, he gives the ratings for each of BC's units from last year. And everything was middle of the road, which is about what you'd expect. Their offense was 62. Their defense was. This is the part that always floors me, but it's the Donovan Azaraku factor. The defense was better at 56, and then the third unit, which you're going to want to vomit everywhere, the special teams was 130th. Yep. So the less said about the special teams, the better. That was what came up, and BC, moving ahead, they look at how things can continue, right? So he gives you the numbers from last year. He goes to how it continues. BC is pretty good in terms of their returning productivity, 62% with and 63% on offense, 61% on defense. 61% on defense is pretty crazy. This is where the numbers to me are a little bit shady because, BC's returning 61% of their production. But man, that 39% that you lost was a lot of 39%. Donovan Azaraku, Cam Horsley, Cam Arnold, you're missing quite a bit there. But I digress. That's just what his numbers show. The offense, you lost, you lost Kai Robichaux and Kamari Morales. But yeah, BC's pretty good. And overall, in terms of production returning, they're 39th. And that's good for 6th in the ACC. You want to know who's worse? Fran Brown and his Syracuse Orange, because heck, they lost Tabor Pena and Kyle McCord and LaQuinn Allen, who probably were most of their offense, and Jackson Meeks too. They've lost quite a bit. So they're way at the bottom. So that tells you what they're looking at there. The next number that Bill goes into that gives you projections and where things are at, he talks about the in starters coming in, which is interesting because of the way the transfer portal works. He wanted to look at, and he's added in, how many starts are being added into your roster, which is important, right? Like, look at a school like Florida State, right? They're bringing in tons of transfers, Tommy Castellanos being one, who's made quite a bit of starts. They played bigger roles. You look at the numbers, and guess which team is last in terms of bringing in starters out of the transfer portal? That would be Boston College. They have a total of 7 new starts coming in. And the starts coming in, I was talking to Mitch Wolf of Eagle Insider about this, has to be Von Pemberton and Zeke Moore, 2 of your depth guys, because they don't count FCS teams in starts coming in because it's a different ball game. And then every FBS guy that you've brought in has not started. Chris Marable, Jason Hewlett, Dylan Lonergan, Ty Lockwood. None of these guys have started. So BC is way at the bottom of this. In fact, Bill Connelly says that BC is one of only 3 teams in the entire country, FCS and FBS, that are bringing in less than 10 starters in the transfer portal. Starts, not starters, in the transfer portal, and redshirt freshmen. He looks at that too as part of their continuity. So it's interesting where that piece goes. And then he talks about BC. He has his preview of the Eagles, and I'm not going to read everything Bill said, but he talks about one really interesting piece is just how good Grayson James was at the end of last year. His QBR was one of the best in the ACC. You went from dead last with Tommy Castellanos. He was dead last and one of the last in the entire country when it comes to QBR to one of the best. So, when you're talking about Dylan Lonergan versus Grayson James, you look at the QBR and you say to yourself, that's a tough one to if really they're thinking of benching him for Lonergan, that's a tough pill to swallow. They also look at, he gives some credit to Reed Harris for some big plays late in the season. And then, he talks about how good some of the guys are that they're bringing. If they can get, and this is where I think BC, the sentences he says here really encapsulate what I think is going to be the keys to the season. He says, a good line lost a couple of all-conference starters. If there's not too much of a drop-off there, there shouldn't be enough. There should be enough to maintain last season's late momentum, especially if the Eagles get something out of transfers such as VJ Wilkins and Ty Lockwood. I really do believe that Lockwood and Wilkins could be really big factors. Like if they have big years, that offense could really click. He gives also some love to Turbo Richard and Dontrell Jones, saying that they could be big, and he calls Davion Crouch excellent. And so, I think this is a team that he has winning 5.2 games next year. I wonder if the addition of some of these transfers, the addition of guys like VJ Wilkins, Ty Lockwood, if they would change the projections if they start to produce, and if Turbo Richard starts to produce and get you up to that 6 win plus. But that's just, again, it's not a thought process there. These are just numbers. That's what he goes with. It's an interesting read. You can check it out. He has some. He really likes Tommy Castellanos for some reason, or thinks there's a high potential there. He's selling on Syracuse. Some really, really good stuff there. So check out Bill Connelly's ACC projection. That's something worth reading. On tomorrow's show, any new news, we're going to break it down. We're getting closer and closer to ACC Media Day, which is, like, for me, like Christmas. It's like the start of football season. We're getting closer to practice. We're going to have that all covered here at Locked On BC. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode, because we're going to have a lot to talk about. Follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. I'm also on Blue Sky and Threads. I'm out there. I saw Twitter was going crazy today. I'm out there on other sites too if you want to make sure you get all your news and connect with me there. And as I say always, I'm on TikTok. And before I leave, one little fun antidote. I go back and I watch my shows. Like, I got new lighting, as you can see, to make this look a little bit more professional. I got my BC stuff behind me. But I'm also a dad. And I put my kids to bed. I usually do that and then go record. Well, on Monday, my daughter was playing with me. And she was like, Dada, you want a sticker? I'm like, sure. She's 4. She stuck a sticker on my shoulder. I totally forgot it was there. I recorded yesterday, and if you go back, you can watch it because I didn't edit it out. You can see the sticker still on my shoulder. And it took me 5 minutes to see it. As I'm obviously, I can see myself on camera when I'm recording. I was too busy talking to not notice that there was a giant gorilla sticker on my shoulder. I eventually peel it off, but it made me laugh because that's the kind of just the things that happen. So I don't know if you guys caught it too. It was just something funny I noticed. So thank you all for listening. I'll see you guys all again tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every day.